what's up guys, it's McNulty here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the 2024 August Soul Exchange or September Soul Exchange, but the Soul Exchange that is coming up in just a few days time. We have our full list released and I have been working on this video. I've been working up my thoughts on these heroes, and initially when I saw the list, I'll be honest, it was massive disappointment. But there are a few gems in here if you know where to look. So we're going to have a look at this list today. We have the list right here. So we're going to go down the list as we normally do, from top to bottom, left to right. We'll go from 10 souls to 15 souls to 20 souls. And I will give you guys my thoughts on who I think are going to be the best picks from this list. So we will get right into it and we will get started with this hero, which is really surprising, honestly, to have this hero at 10 souls, Aonia. She is a super elemental hero. We have seen them in the portal before. I think we saw Jekun or Jekwan, whatever you want to call him. But he was featured at, I think, 20 soul tier in the last soul exchange. So to have one of them at 10 souls is pretty interesting. Now, why is she at 10 souls? Well, we got to find out, don't we? So let's have a closer look at Aonia right now. So she is a fiend summoner, essentially. She summons this dagger fiend to the target and holy enemies as well. So if you do take Aonia, basically what you want to do is target anybody who's not holy. Then at least you get another fiend or maybe another 2 fiends, depending on how the team is set up. Now, we're not in a holy tank meta at the moment, so that kind of works against her. But it's still a pretty awesome effect because the fiend itself is pretty beefy. So it gives 250% or damages with 250% attack every turn. But the only downside, again, there's a couple of downsides. This fiend only has 20% health, so it's pretty easy to get rid of. And there's a lot of healers that can heal for a lot more than 20% health. But when the dagger fiend disappears, when the dagger fiend disappears after it's absorbed enough healing, it then triggers that bleed damage effect. So that 810 bleed damage, which can increase with limit breaks and emblems, and it triggers after the fiend is absorbed or disappears. So there is a kind of guarantee there that the bleed damage is going to trigger. So to be honest, I don't think Aonia is a bad hero. For 10 souls, I really don't think that she's a bad hero. You could definitely be doing a lot worse. So from the first line, I think Aonia may be a pretty decent option, and I'm certainly a little bit tempted by her, but she can be a bit tricky to play with. You do need to know who to target. And the other good thing about her is that she does get that troop damage multiplier, where she gets stronger troops of the stronger element, which she gets 100% increased damage. And she's a rogue class as well. There's a lot of good things going for this hero. Her stats may be a slightly bit dated, but then she's probably less than a year old. So yeah, even though her stats are slightly lower, she can be a pretty good hero. So do not sleep on Aonia. I still think she's pretty good. The next hero that we've got in the first row is going to be another hero from the Styx family. And I know Erebus was actually featured at 10 souls, but I think Nemesis is better. I just do. I think Nemesis is definitely better than Erebus. So let's have a little look over her. Let's see what she does. So she's obviously got this charge mechanic, and with the Styx family, they're one of the only heroes like the ninjas that have 3 charges. The first and the second charge usually combine to make the last charge. So the initial charge, she's going to be dealing 470% damage to the target. Okay, that's a pretty okay snipe, but you have to remember that's running at faster than very fast speed. So easily within 2 tile matches, you're doing 470% damage to the target. And then for 3 turns, every time an enemy's mana's increased by any special skill, status effect, level property, passive skill, family effect, or minion, they receive 200 damage. So if you go against Julius or whoever else the guys picked from the Soul Exchange, and that minion increases their mana, every time that happens, they receive 200 damage. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it definitely frustrates you. It can eat you up over time. And she is of the right element, and she gets a pretty solid snipe. Now let's move on to charge 2 for her. So at second mana charge, she is going to be dealing 610% damage to the target. The problem is, again, her stats are dated. You can see she's only running 832 team power. I believe she did get a bump in one of the balance updates, and there's nothing to say that these heroes won't be buffed again in the future. So don't let that put you off too much. So 610% damage to the target. All enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 3 turns. Don't sleep on that, guys. It's immunity, buff immunity for all enemies for the next 3 turns. So she might just be hitting one, but she's giving all enemies immunity. And then attempted mana generation buffs will be replaced by a negative 34% mana generation. So she's not punishing them in terms of damage, but she is punishing them in terms of reducing their mana generation, which can be, in some cases, even worse. So I like Charge 2 for Nemesis. Charge 3, 650% damage to the target, so not quite as big of an increase, granted. And all enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 3 turns. On top of the negative mana generation, for the following 3 turns, every time an enemy's mana's increased again, they will receive that 200 damage. So it's kind of just combining, combining everything together that we had from the previous 2 special skills. So yeah, again, even though she may not look that good and you may just glance over her and see that stat and be like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not convinced by this hero. She's actually a really, really good sniper, probably one of the best snipers that we actually have in the game, with a really valuable skill which prevents your enemies from giving buffs. And she can do that pretty much. She can do that at average speed. At fast speed, she's a mana controller and she has a pretty decent hit as well. I do like it. Honestly, I do like this hero. And I think that she's a pretty good deal at 10 souls, to be fair. Again, just the stats is the only thing, but troops, emblems, limit breaks, whatever you want to do to get this hero up, it'll probably be worth it, I would say. Let's move on. So we're going pretty well so far, and then it takes a turn for the worse. What is this hero of the month doing in here? LeAdria, yeah, she's 2023. 2023 was last year, but she's a hero of the month, man. Come on. Soul Exchange cannot be featuring heroes of the month anymore. You might make an argument for Ruffian and Nergib, but I can't make an argument for LeAdria. In fact, you know what? Let's see if we can. There's actually 1 or 2 good things about her. So first of all, she is summoning this minion for all of the allies with 30% HP. When summoned, this spirit minion boosts the health of its owner by 100. It's a very small boost, and I was hoping that the minions could stack on top of each other, but bad news is they don't. Unfortunately, if you haven't leveled her, they don't. And this effect can't be dispelled. So that is pretty cool that you cannot dispel it, but you can pretty easily remove the minion, so that'll take it away. The part I like about this hero is the next bit, where all allies' special skills deal an additional 20% damage for 4 turns. So she's actually increasing the power of your whole team. So she's kind of a pseudo healer. She puts up a 30% heal with the minion, plus she puts up 100 boosted health every turn from the minion until it's removed. But on top of that, she gives all allies 20% increase for all their special skills during the next 4 turns. So that to me is a pretty good factor. If you've got some pretty good nature heroes already and you want to increase their power, then I guess she could be okay for you. But honestly, I haven't found her to be that effective in practice. She is running a pretty okay team power at nearly 900. So if you're lacking you've got a green team and you find that they're dying a little bit too easily and you're losing out a little bit on the power of their special skills, then maybe, just maybe, LeAdria could be an option for you. But that's the only case that I'm going to say that she could be an option. Otherwise, leave her alone from this first row. Now let's move on to our next hero. So the next hero we've got in this row is Zenobia. So Zenobia is a really, really good hero for one specific area of the game, and that is to boost your scores against Titans. Primarily, that is what I would use her for. She is not featured with her costume. Obviously, if she was, she probably wouldn't be at 10 souls. She'd be a lot higher. but she is good against Titans. So she's an average speed hero, 320% damage to the enemies on the edges of the formation, which does kind of work pretty well. But if there's one enemy alive, she gets the double damage. We know about that. The main thing she does is alter the fire shields on the board so that when an attacking hero casts, the shield become enhanced with 64% increased attack. That is really cool. Tile booster against Titans, she's going to increase your scores. If you're not struggling against the regular Titans, then for Mythic Titans, sorry guys, for Mythic Titans or for, sorry guys, bit of a blip there. My phone keeps turning off because of the battery. Anyway, so for Mythic Titans, like I was saying, or for the Monster Island event, that's what I wanted to say, which is one that's going to be coming up pretty soon, I think. She would be a good option. So you can give that extra boost to the tiles, get some more damage against the Titans. So if you're struggling, definitely consider picking up Zenobia. She's pretty damn good for that. If you're not struggling, then just leave her alone, honestly. Then the last hero, I believe, which is our blue hero from the row, is going to be a new hero, actually, very new hero, which is Julius. So he was with us at the last iteration that we had of the Magic Tower, I believe. And he's an interesting hero. Now, I say interesting doesn't necessarily mean good. There are a lot of people who are kind of excited about Julius. I'm not one of them, I wouldn't say. And I wasn't when I reviewed him. I thought it might be a bit of a joke that they were actually releasing this hero into the Magic Portal. And let's have a look at him. So I'll tell you why. I mean, stats-wise, 936 team power. He's probably the strongest hero on this list. So that he has going for him. He has good survivability. At the first mana charge that he gets, he summons this Enchanted Sigil minion with 15% HP and 20% attack. It's not a lot of HP. 15% HP is paper thin. But when summoned, this minion gives 20% increased mana generation for its owner as long as they have the minion, okay? It's okay. It's really okay, and that is about it. The nice thing about him, he does get that super passive, the Magic Family passive, where they reduce the mana by 5%, is really, really good. But that's all that's kind of good about him at the first charge. In order to get him to be anywhere near useful, you have to get him to the second charge. And even then, it's not quite so impactful. So let's have a look. So he summons a Cursed Sigil Fiend for all enemies. The Fiend damages its target with 100% attack every turn. So basically, a slash attack every turn from the Fiend. Now, the Cursed Fiend absorbs healing. It absorbs anywhere up to 60% of its target's max health. 60%, that's a beefy Fiend. So it's a difficult sucker to get rid of, but it's doing 100% damage each turn. Remember, we've got Aonia in the same row. She also does a Fiend. Her Fiend does 250% damage every single turn, plus the bleed damage after you remove it or it gets healed away. So the Cursed Fiend does give negative 38% mana generation for its owner for as long as the owner has the Fiend. That makes life a lot more difficult. It slows you down to the point where it's really, really frustrating. Plus, you also get the negative mana generation from the stacks that they get as a Magic Family on their own. So that is pretty tricky to deal with. But at the same time, he's not doing anything else. He's not healing. He's not doing anything. He's just terrible at his first charge. And to get him to his second charge, he's running at slow speed. So again, he's not my favorite hero at all. So from this first row, I would definitely say that my eyes would be on either Aonia or Nemesis. Both would actually be really, really good options despite the more dated stats that we're looking at there. I think both of those heroes are excellent picks from this first row at 10 souls. Now, moving on, we're into the 15 soul tier now. And our first hero is again one of the newest heroes in the Magic Family. I do love the Magic Family heroes. I've got Ray, I've got Willow, I've obviously got Melina. I use them all the time and I really still love them. Melina's getting a bit dated, so I may need to bust out the alpha ethers on her, but for now she's still pretty good. So Becky, probably pretty high up on my wish list if I'm totally honest. She is an interesting looking hero. She doesn't look like much, but she's pretty skillful. So she is mainly an attacking hero. I will say that much about Becky. At the first charge, she can be effective. So she deals 350% damage to the target each time that target activates their special skill during the following 3 turns. Mana of all other enemies is reduced by 15%. So the way you want to use this hero, and I've seen her used to good effect like this before, you target somebody on the opposite team whose special is not going to wreck you. Somebody who is maybe like a healer, or somebody who's not going to do severe damage. Like, you're not going to pop this on acid fire and then make her fire a special skill, but you could pop it on somebody else, then make them fire their special skill. Every time they fire that special skill, they're going to be reducing the mana of their allies by 15%, and that should give you enough charge or enough time to charge up the other heroes on your team. So if you want to use her as a very fast mana controller, that is where this chick shines, and she's really, really good at it, trust me. She also gets that magic passive, so at the same time she is reducing their mana generation by at least 5% every time she casts her special. I think it can get, sorry, I'm waving because there's a freaking fly flying around. You can get her up to 50% reduced mana generation on that passive, and she gets a heal as well. So there is a chance, 50% chance for her to give 15% health to her whole team. So that is also really, really good. They are tactical heroes, the magic heroes. That is where they shine. But I mean, that's not really a problem, is it? If you're somebody like me who enjoys the tactical side of the game, if you just want to smash and blast everyone to pieces, then you have to spend mega bucks on the new heroes, because that's the way you're going to be able to do it. But if you enjoy a challenge, then Becky might just be a girl. Now let's look at second part of her specials. So second mana charge, she increases the mana of all allies by 10%. So if you've got someone who's close to charge, she's going to increase their mana by 10%, and you might just get them to fire. But on top of that, for the next 5 turns, she does this hippo effect, as we all know, where she deals 250% damage to all enemies every time any other ally casts their special skill. And that can fire off multiple times within the same turn, and that can be game over if you plan it right. Get your allies to nearly charge. Hippo doesn't do this. Hippo increases the mana generation after she fires off that buff. Becky does it at the same time. So she gives them the 10% mana generation. She says, guys, I'm ready to go. Fire off your special skills now. And that is the beautiful thing about Becky at Charge 2. So at Charge 1, really great tactical hero. Charge 2, she could just be that nail in the coffin that you need. So yeah, enough said about Becky. I really like her, and I think she's a good pick at 15 souls. Do not sleep on that hero. The next hero at 15 souls is another absolute G. Constance. I've had her in my roster for a while now. I was super surprised when I pulled her. If you go back through the community posts on my channel, you'll be able to find it. I wasn't quick enough to get the phone up. I was like, shit, I need to screenshot this. But yeah, sorry for nerding out. But Constance was one of my most wanted heroes. And that's only because I didn't get Bastet from the Season 5 heroes. Like, she was one that I'd wanted for ages. And Constance does what she does, just better. Not necessarily what the costume does, because I know we've just had the costume released. But Constance is a very, very good protector of your team. And don't listen to people who say she's only good on defense, because she's good on offense as well. She's actually very, very good on offense as well. So the way she works, she deals 230% damage to all of the enemies, and all allies get this 45% chance to dodge special skills for the following 3 turns. It's not a huge, massive damage, 230%. But with, limit break, she's actually pretty, it's a decent amount. But the main part is that she gives the rest of your team time. And time is everything, because you need that extra match. You need those extra couple of tiles to be able to charge your specials. And that is what Constance will do for you. I use her on a team with Tang Shang Jiang, whatever his name is, with the cleanse and the boosted health. I use her as well. They're kind of my 2 survive heroes, and then I've got a nice trio of ice heroes, on that team, which can just do the damage. but they make it, her and Tang Zhan, they make it so that those heroes get that chance. And that is what she's all about. She does make a good defensive hero as well. Definitely as a flank, I would say is really good. But I like her on offense as well. So I think she is a great pick from this portal as well. So 2 good picks at the 15 soul tier. Becky and Constance definitely both get a stamp of approval. They're both over 900 on the team power, so that is awesome as well. Really, I can't complain too much about those 2 being in the portal. Next guy, we've got Archie. Now, this one I'm a bit disappointed about, to be honest. He's not featured with his costume. His base stats without the costume are pretty damn terrible. What are they now? I'm just looking for this here. 845 without the costume. That's really not enough to be in the 15 soul tier, I don't think. And he doesn't do enough either. So he does 250% damage to all enemies. He is running at fast speed. So he's a little bit better than Constance in terms of the damage, but he's not anywhere near her in terms of the stats. All enemies then get the immunity to new status effect buffs for 4 turns, which is great. Immunity to status effect buffs. But remember, we looked at a tier 1 hero in Nemesis who gives a 3-turn immunity and a pretty decent 470% snipe. So I put them kind of in the same realm. And the stats are pretty much the same as well. So I don't know what Archie's doing here for 15 souls. Anyway, he should be at 10. Unless you get his costume out, in which case, yeah, of course, 15 is fine. But then each time that they attempt to get a buff, they get 150 damage. Again, in the costume version, it's 300 damage. So it's really not going to do as much as you think it will. If you need a buff blocker, I would probably sort of stay with Nemesis, unless you can afford the 15 cells, in which case he may be just a slightly tiny teensy bit better in certain circumstances. But I'm not completely sold on Archie, put it that way. So let's move on to our next hero in this row. And who's it going to be? Let me just see. Sorry, my list's not the same as your guys. Oh, right. Flipp and Flipp. Why do we have to get Flipp and Flipp in here? If you didn't grab, oh gosh, what's her name now? Phonexa. If you didn't grab Phonexa from the last Portal Soul Exchange, then maybe grab him. He's okay. He's a healer, basically. He recovers 45% health for all allies. He does make it to where their attacks bypass defensive buffs, but we've got so many dispellers, buff blockers, everything else that there's not really room for that. If you're not doing that as a heal up front, it's kind of like you have to find somebody else who's going to fill that gap. You can build synergies with him, but again, I've got like Willow, for example. That second charge with the bypassing defense buffs doesn't come into effect all that often, if I'm totally honest. And I mean, somebody like Norman is the absolute pinnacle of what that could be. But with Flipp, it's most of the time it's just a 40% heal. He gives 50% critical chance for 4 turns, so you can use him against Mythic Titans and regular Titans. But critical chance is not something that you really mess around with in wars and raids. And to be honest, that's my favorite area of the game. A close second would probably be the events and challenges, but I digress. This guy's just not a great pick from this row. Anyway, at 15 souls, I just don't think Flipp is worth it. I think he's flipping awful. And then Thanatos, whatever his name is. So he is our last hero at the 15 soul tier before we get into the big boys. And this guy, again, he's a little bit of a disappointment. Maybe not quite as much. He does have some interesting skills. Again, a lot to do with mana generation with this guy. So we'll have a quick look over his card. First charge, it's a 20% health recovery and increases the mana generation by 24% for 2 turns. Not really long enough to do anything. I'm not really going to say that's a great charge 1 because it just isn't. So charge 2 recovers 30% for all allies and then increases the mana of all allies by 10%. So this is kind of X-Null. Basically, it's the exact same thing that X-Null does now after he's been nerfed. And as you'll know, it's not quite enough to get the job done. You can put him together with a Bard hero and like a slow speed blue hero in the right class, like if it's a druid, for example, where they get that 4% mana bonus, and then they can all charge within 9 tiles. But to me, that sounds like a lot of work. That is something I would do. That is something I did actually with Brontis, who does like the same thing, but he's a 4-star from the same portal. The benefit about Thanatos, even though he has lower stats, is that he does give that extra mana generation, and he does get that Styx family passive, which I haven't really spoken about, but I don't want to bore you guys to death. It's just that they can't get defense down, elemental defense down, any kind of defense down, and that can make them a lot harder to kill, because most people just go for defense down and then, you know, damage on top of that, and that's what takes the heroes out. You can't do that with these guys. Last mana charge for him, 50% health recovery, really good. Increases the mana by 20%. Again, that is now we're talking, but he's running at slow speed, so there's kind of a caveat there, a trade-off. You'd have to put him with other slow speed heroes to be able to get the most of that, and probably in different elements would be a good idea as well. And then all allies get plus 40% mana generation for 2 turns. Now that is, for 4 turns. Now that is awesome. If they'd have put that at charge 2, I'd pick this hero all day long. But because it's slower, because it's at charge 3, it's a little bit more tricky to work with. And yeah, I'm not completely sold on Thanatos. So from this row, I'm going to go with, probably the first 2, the purple and the yellow. That's not on purpose. That's just by coincidence. So Becky, fantastic hero. Really, really great hero. And the cleric class, didn't even mention that. Family bonus, all the rest of it that she's got going on is awesome. Constance, excellent hero. Again, I didn't mention the cover effect on top of what she does. Really, really good for making your team stick around that much longer. Anyways, that is enough said on the 15 soul tier. Let us get into the 20 souls. These are supposed to be the upper echelon. So these are the ones for the sort of cheap to play who are not really cheap to play. Like secretly, you're not cheap to play and you know it. Any rate, the first hero on this list is Rochefort, whatever his name is, from the Musketeer family as well. He's a good hero. I mean, decent stats, real decent amount of damage actually. 565%. I was 900. That would be great. 565% damage to the target and minor damage to nearby enemies. To put that into perspective, somebody like Erlang Shen hits for 500% to the target and then 250% to the nearby enemies. And Erlang's stats are about 60 points or so lower than this guy. Okay, so that just gives you an idea. If you've ever been hit by Erlang, you know he hits pretty hard. He does have that devastating after effect, but this guy's got an after effect as well. Don't forget about that. And he hits 65% harder. And he's a fighter. And he gets the cover effect as well, which is very, very strong. So there are a lot of good points for this guy that people may miss out when looking over his card. Most people just go straight to the stats and say, nah, he's trash. Forget about him. But not everybody's a whale like you. Not everybody is, unfortunately. Anyway, 565% damage is a good hit. We've established that. If the target's defeated within 3 turns, all enemies receive 626 damage. Now, I believe that does go up with limit breaks and emblems, and I believe it's received a bit of a buff within the balance update. And again, as I said before, there is no reason to believe that these heroes will not receive slight buffs or bigger buffs in the future. It probably will happen, okay? But anyways, for now, this is what I'm working with, and this is what we're working with. So the way I would not look at this guy is trying to find ways initially where you can trigger that effect. He still deals a boatload of damage up front, but just if it so happens that you do kill that target that you hit initially, the whole team's going to get another boatload of damage, 626 damage. So that's going to just wipe everybody out on top of the good work that you've already done. So play with this guy as you normally would. Put him in as part of your trio or your quadro, whatever you want to call it, in your attacking team, and go to town. And then in like maybe 60 or 70% of your battles, you just happen to trigger that effect off and you think, wow, whole team's dead. Done. Job done. I can go home now. But that's the way this guy works. Do not try and plan around him. I've seen lots of people saying, oh yeah, it's so difficult because I don't know whether I target this hero, if I'm going to kill them with his snipe because it's too strong. Don't worry about it. If you kill them, they're no longer in the battle. You don't have to worry about it. Move on to the next one. Anyway, enough said on Roachford. Is he worth 20 souls? Yeah, I would say so. Right, next hero, Queen Go Wang. Yeah, it's going to pain me to say this because I really liked this hero when she came out, but she hasn't held up well over time. Her kind of downside is that she's too reliant on the enemies. So we'll go over her special really quick and hopefully I'll be able to tell you what I mean. So she deals 330% damage to all enemies. Okay, that's a good hit at average speed to all enemies. Then all allies get 10% mana every time an enemy uses their special skill during 4 turns. So if you're fighting against her, you know you're going to be giving mana when you use the special skill. It doesn't mean you're not going to use your special skill, but you know you're going to be giving them 10% mana. So you can kind of understand what's going to happen, who's going to fire off. It's a pretty okay effect when she is on defense. On offense, it's so difficult to plan around because you've got to make them fire off their specials, and their specials are doing damage to you. So that 10% mana that you get from them may or may not make the difference in you winning or losing the battle. It can do, but not a lot of the time. So like I'm saying, she's a little bit more random because she's reliant on the enemy casting rather than your team. If it was 10% every time you cast a special, yeah, give me Queen Go Wang all day long. She's freaking fantastic. And then the next part. She gets Vengeance for 4 turns. The Vengeance is dispelled by an enemy's special skill. All enemies receive 525 damage. Now, if you dispel Vengeance from Queen Go Wang while she's got it, then you're a bit of an idiot, really, aren't you? Because you just shouldn't do it. Like, you know it's there. If you dispel it, you're going to get... So you just don't use your dispeller. I mean, you will... why would you... You probably won't need to use the dispeller. Hopefully you don't need to. I mean, there may be cases where you need to, but in most cases you can just kind of wait it out. But yeah, it's... What I'm saying is it's not as effective as the effects that get put on you. Like Erlang Shen, like Pop Hit, like Star Walker, like all of these guys, they put the effect on you and then it's a negative effect. So you want to cleanse it off. You need to cleanse it off. She puts this Vengeance on herself. It's not really bothering you that much, so it's not going to do anything. But if you dispel it from her, then you're going to be in a boatload of pain. So yeah, she's good. She's good. Don't get me wrong. She is really good. But I think she should have been at 15 souls, not 20 souls. So for 20 souls, I feel like she's a bit expensive. I wouldn't go with Queen Go Wang. Next hero is another super elemental. Now, I mean, if we look at the comparison here, we've got Xandr. She's at 840 team power. And then if I scroll back through my little list here, we've got Aonia. She's at 849 team power. So they're pretty much exactly the same in terms of the power. But we've got one of them, in fact, Aonia is stronger. But we've got one who is at the absolute top of the list, 20 souls. And we've got one who's at 10. So there's some disparity there. There's obviously a pretty big reason for that, I think. So Xandr, I mean, she's an insanely good hero. When I did the tier rankings for the top 10 nature heroes in the whole of Empires and Puzzles, she was definitely on that top 10 list. And she is still a freaking awesome hero. Not quite as good as she was back then, so we'll have to rethink things, but she's still really good. So 450% damage to the target and all ice enemies. Again, like I said with Aonia, it's a case to where you're going to target an enemy that's not of the ice element, and then you're at least going to hit 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, depending on how many ice enemies are on the team. Then it automatically does 407 damage to the target and to all of the ice enemies when their mana's full, and reduces their mana by 50% for 4 turns. It's like a 4-turn mindless attack to as many ice enemies plus the target that are on the field. And that's all running at average speed. So that is awesome. Then on top of that, she alters the nature shields so that they give 37% more mana. So she's going to be able to get all of your nature allies back to charge that much quicker. not as great on defense as she is on offense. There was a sort of stage where she was actually pretty meta on defense. But as far as offensive heroes go, she's fantastic as part of a green team. She can get your heroes firing off that much quicker. She can do the mana control. She can obviously, like I said, boost the mana of the tiles. So she's doing those two jobs really, really well. Just speed and power, and she looks great as well. So nothing not to like about Xandrella except for the stats. And like I said before, the stats really on everything, especially when it comes to mana control heroes. I think the stats matter a little bit less with them, and maybe that's what they're trying to play to in this soul exchange. But Xandrella is a good choice at 20 souls. I don't think that you will regret it for a second. Next hero, Hypnos. Man, this guy's awesome. But I mean, this is a prime example of what I was just saying doesn't really work as well in practice. So this hero is insanely good. He has a fantastic special. If you could find a way to increase his stats by 100 on top of what he's got, and then add your limit breaks, second limit breaks, emblems, master emblems. In fact, master emblems may be a way to do it. But then you can go defense path on that. But then he doesn't really get as much on the attack. It's difficult. But if you could do that, then I might have a completely different opinion on this guy. But he is still good. It's just that he's a bit lower in terms of the stats, and he doesn't have the same effect for mana control. But what he does have is a really freaking strong priority dispel, which is always a good thing. You do get that with other heroes, but not quite in the same way. So let's have a look what he's doing. So the first charge is 170% damage to all enemies. Not a lot of damage, but then all enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 2 turns. We do have, like I said before, a fast hero that will do that, the same speed, but for 10 souls. So we can't win on the first charge. Second charge, though, dispels buffs from all enemies. Straight up, that's a fantastic skill. You get it with Costume Gormek, though, so what makes this guy special? He deals 270% damage to all enemies. That has actually been buffed, but I don't have the statistics in front of me. I think it was definitely buffed to somewhere around the 300 mark. And then all enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 3 turns. So priority dispel, decent amount of damage, which Costume Gormek does as well, but not quite as much. And then all enemies get that immunity to new buffs for the following 3 turns. So the best of both worlds in terms of dispel up front, and then you're immune to it for the next 3 turns. You kind of get that with Cademan, Costume 2 Cademan, but you get it just after the damage, which is not quite as good. And then he blocks their buffs for the 3 turns after. So you can think of this guy as like a hit all Costume 2 Cademan, hopefully with 5-star stats if you can afford to limit break and second limit break and emblem, etc. So that's a really good control effect. Third mana charge dispels buffs from all enemies. Then the damage increases. My card says 335. I believe it's, maybe I might be wrong on this, but I think it's like 380 now or 360 or something like that after the balance update. All enemies are immune to new status effect buffs for 4 turns. So at slow speed, this guy is a devastating hero. Like I said before, the stats do work against him in a big way. So I'm not sure that he is worth the 20 souls that they're asking. I think he'd, at 15 souls, be kind of a no-brainer. But at 20 souls, you're pushing it a little bit, I think, with Hypnos. And then our last hero in this portal is going to be Cell. The rock golem minion summoning waste of time from the Mask Gods portal. Probably the worst of the Mask Gods. She does nothing. Like, she doesn't do nothing, but she doesn't do anything really effective. So she summons this rock golem minion. It's got a decent amount of HP and attack. I thought it was going to be actually really good. And then the rock golem gives its owner the golem stone skin, which is like a gargoyle stone skin. And again, every 3 turns. But the problem is, you hit it once. So it says here, golem stone skin drops all damage to 1, but it's removed after 1 hit. So you have 1 hit every 3 turns that's going to be reduced to 1. So you know that's going to happen ahead of time. So you know you're not going to fire your special skill off on that effect. Now, granted, there are 5 minions, and the idea is that, sorry guys, the idea is that it's difficult because you don't know which of the 5 minions have got the effect. So it can kind of be pretty cool, but I found that every single time I go against her, all I end up doing is just chucking tiles and just dealing damage, and she's just really doing nothing, and I end up taking out the minions anyway without even wanting to do it. So she's a very, very difficult hero to use. It sounds like it's going to be good on paper, but it's not a good effect. She does have probably, I think it's the second highest team power out of anyone. I think Julius has the highest team power out of this list, but I would stay far away from Cell if I'm being totally honest, which I am. So stay away from Cell, please, unless you really want a horrible hero. So out of this 20 soul list, who do I think is worth it? Roquefort, yeah, absolutely. Queen Wang, not so much. Xandrella, I'm going to say yes, despite the dated stats. And Hypnos, I mean, you know what? He will do the job for you. So I'm going to say he's probably worth it as well if you've got 20 souls to burn. So in summary, we've got some she's got some pretty good heroes from this list. So I'm hoping you guys aren't quite as disappointed as some of you may have been looking at the list initially. If you're a whale, this is probably not for you. If you're anywhere in the middle meta or you know, climbing to the top of the middle meta, you're going to be able to find a good pick out of this bunch. At 15 souls, Becky's an excellent choice, and you'll have loads of fun with her. And that's what the whole point of the game is, right? Just to have a fun hero. Becky is that fun hero. Constance is awesome. We've got at the 10 souls tier, Aonia, who I still think is actually really good and would also be a fun hero to mess around with combinations with. And then Nemesis, who's still a pretty good hero as well. And then in the last group, Roquefort, I like him. What can I say? He's just straight up front damage. Makes an excellent part of a purple stack. Pop him with someone like Guardian Panther if you did grab her from the other soul exchange. Deal the damage and then see if you can get that extra damage to trigger off by doing more damage. Like he's for those people who want to hit hard, and his stats are still really good. Xandrella, excellent hero if you like a bit of trick play, a bit of mana control. And then Hypnos if you need that priority dispel at the 5-star level, which is very, very hard to come by, and then blocking the buffs for the whole of the enemy team. So a bit more tactical and a bit more technical than other soul exchange lists that we've seen, but it's pretty good. That's my honest opinion. It's pretty good. I don't know who I'm going to pick yet. I will decide when they're released in the game. I may do another video about it. I'm not sure. But for now, please do let me know in the comments what your guys' thoughts are on these heroes. Let me know if there's any extra bits that you think I should be adding in here about some of these heroes. Let me know who you guys are going to pick. Obviously, I'm interested to know. And also, drop us a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with your mother, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.